Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Yeah. As you know, I'm the weather woman for the place. And every Friday when we have the seminar, we talk about weather, and today's weather is absolutely fantastic. It's a great morning in Northwest Arkansas. Those of you who are not here are missing the daffodils and the hyacinths and the budding trees. So welcome. And those of you who don't know me, since we are still new, I am Ranu Jung. I'm the founding executive director for the Institute for Integrative and Innovative Research, I-R, and I am thrilled to welcome you today to our next speaker in the spring seminar speaker series. But before I introduce him, let me introduce to you or talk to you all about I-R. And many of you are already familiar, but those of you who are not, we are driven by purpose. Our mission is to find solutions to what we call wicked problems, those that cannot be answered by one group, one person by themselves, but by bringing different sectors together. So we use a convergence approach across industry, academia, government, philanthropy to find solutions. But what is the purpose? Our purpose is ultimately to deploy solutions to have a societal impact. And there are 5 words that I think we have talked about multiple times that define us: integrative, which is in our title itself; convergence; economic development; have solutions that are at scale; and then obviously societal impact. We're doing this through a process by addressing a grand challenge, and our current grand challenge, which is so broad that I think it will last for a long time, is integrative health, bringing together health tech, food tech, and both are regulated industries. So data and devices that are secure. So cyber kind of crosscuts all of it. So I am completely delighted to welcome today Dr. Joe DeSimone from Stanford University. And all the things that I talked to you about, we are just talking about it. He's already lived that, and he's moving those things forward. He is the Sanjeev Sam Gambhir Professor of Translational Medicine and Chemical Engineering at Stanford University. He's also co-director of the Stanford's Canary Center, and he's the founding faculty director of the Center for STEM Mentorship at Stanford and the vice chair of strategy in the Department of Radiology. I think I can give you all these titles, but most important thing is that he is a thinker, innovator, a futurist, and he's able to bring all of these ideas together and actually deploy them to get solutions done. He spent time at North Carolina State for a long time, so he's been embedded very much with students both in engineering and chemistry, and now he has got joint appointments between medicine and engineering. So again, it's the breadth of bringing all of that together. He's inducted into the National Academy of Engineering, Medicine, and also the arts and sciences. AAS, Arts and Academic Sciences, right? So I think all of that tells you don't get there without having done a lot of fantastic work. Some of the other things that perhaps we won't know usually is that he's been responsible for numerous breakthroughs, including for green chemistry, medical devices, nanomedicines, and 3D printing. And in the 1990s, his students invented a green manufacturing process for synthesis of fluoropolymers, so-called forever chemicals, the PFAS stuff. And then later they came up with a new print technology called print itself, PRINT, rooted in imprint lithography that was there. And it is also, he's done a lot of work with nanoparticles of a certain size that are particularly new. Most importantly, with this 3D printing work, and part of what he has done with his students is based on some of their technologies, is they started just 6 years ago. He was CEO of a company called Carbon Inc. Carbon Inc. has raised already 700 million plus in order to be able to take this technology out to have an impact. So I could go on and on and on. He's been a national under President Barack Obama. He got the U.S. National Medical of Technology and Innovation. So I don't think I need to speak anymore, but I need to give the floor here to Dr. DeSimone. We are looking forward to a whole day of fantastic engagement with him. There's a panel in the afternoon for entrepreneurship, so please come back to it so that there's more to learn. And then I also want to point out that Sunday is International Women's Day. There are pins outside. Celebrate the 50% of the membership of our humanity. Okay,
Great,
welcome.
Thank you. Feel like I need to give you $20 or something. That was a heck of an introduction. Well, they say leaders bring the weather. You actually brought the weather report. So that was a first as well. So it's really great to be here. I guess I've been in this area 6 or 7 times now, and mostly towards Bentonville area. And I'll never forget when Alice Walton walked through my company in 2017. And I think she fell in love with the dogs in the lab, or not in the labs, but in adjacent areas, and what we were doing in manufacturing. And ultimately, Madrone Capital ended up making an investment in our company. And she loves our sneakers. You'll see some images of related ones. And but this whole idea about manufacturing is what I had a chance to do as a chemist, to move into and develop a technology that actually moved into manufacturing. My son is now the CEO of Carbon, and we've got some other companies. And my career has been very episodic. There have been chapters. There's been a green chemistry chapter in supercritical CO2, and then there's been an imprint lithography chapter, which launched a company called Liquidia. It's about a $3 billion market cap now for pulmonary medicines. And now we're heavily into 3D printing. And I thought I'd share with you a story about 3D printing and how we're thinking about its evolution. And I'll tie it mostly to consumer and healthcare and sort of things we're doing now. So everyone's heard of 3D printing for sure. And when I think of 3D printing, you think about the competition. You think about what else is out there. Or molding technologies, formative technologies are the lion's share of how things are made. Think about injection molding of plastics, where you get a cavity, you heat a material into a liquid state, fills a cavity, takes the shape of the cavity, you cool it down, and then you have to get the object out of the cavity. Then there's subtractive techniques, milling. Sounds like what's going on outside the building here, right? And then there's bottom-up additive technologies. I think at the end of the day, what's most distinguishing about what additive manufacturing is making things you can't make by the other techniques. And that's the real power of this. And then also to think about this, and it's again pretty simple, you don't buy stuff you can't make. Right? If somebody is not able to make it, you can't buy it. And it sounds simple, but what that means is product design is often done with the tools that are available, and it's hard to push innovations when you don't have these kinds of capabilities. And so when you think about at the end of the day, why 3D printing, I think it's so powerful, I think of 2 themes. One is making the unmakeable by traditional techniques. And then another one is scaling bespoke products to the millions, where each one's a snowflake, each one is unique. Think about dental products and other things and having those scale. And those are the 2 use cases that I think are the most powerful. We were enamored with this video out of Hollywood. And in particular, we're enamored with this object growing out of a puddle. The mass of the object is being provided by a pool of liquid underneath the object as it's growing. And we thought that that was a really good way to be thinking about 3D printing. And we ended up figuring out an idea to do this. And it was really started with a breakthrough in material science, which harks back to the first chapter of my independent career in making fluoropolymers. And we basically designed a 3D printer that has a window at the bottom of a reservoir that's like most windows. It's optically transparent and lets light in. But this window is also permeable to oxygen. Oxygen is an inhibitor to free radical polymerization. So you think about what is a material that you're all familiar with that's optically transparent and permeable to oxygen. And some of you may be wearing them now, contact lenses. So this is a cousin to contact lenses. And what happens is we're going to lower a platform into this reservoir, and it's going to submerge underneath a partially UV curable liquid. It's going to get very close to the window, and then we're going to start projecting light, a pattern of light which represents a cross section of the object on the left. And that first layer is going to cure asymmetrically. It's going to bond to the platform, but not bond to the window because of the oxygen coming through the window. And there's actually a gap between this part and the window that's submerged under the resin. And as the object pulls up, resin is getting sucked into the gap in between the part and the window. And this allows the printer to go 100 to 1,000 times faster than a traditional 3D printer. Most 3D printers, it would glue to the window. Then you have to fracture it off the window to create a gap to bring in more resin. So this is a mechanism for resin renewal at the interface of the part. And here's an actual image. This is optical coherence tomography. And we put a contrast agent in the resin so you can see the flow of liquid that's forming. And you see there's a negative pressure in the middle of that part as it's drawing resin into the gap. That gap is about 20 to 50 microns, depending on how we run the printer. And it allows resin renewal automatically. And this allows a printer to go substantially faster. Okay? We've worked out all the details. It's complicated. It requires a software control system, and it requires hardware that's remotely controllable with software. And you can imagine so many things differ depending on which resin you're using. So we have over 50 different resins now because you need resins with different mechanical properties. You need resins that are elastomers. You need rigid materials. You need flame retardant materials. You need impact resistant materials. You need different dental materials. And so every resin's got a different viscosity. It's got a different optical density. It's got different mechanical properties. Every resin requires its own batch of software. Okay, so it's a software-controlled chemical reaction to grow parts. And it's tailored to every different resin we have. And a printer needs to respond accordingly. And so we built the printers with a subdiscipline of engineering called mechatronics. So the printers are highly sensored up. They're fully automated, and we can adjust all the parameters. Now you can imagine as you pull this part up and you draw liquid into the gap, that's kind of like drawing liquid up a straw. So atmospheric pressure plays a role. And we have to control all these printers because the printers operating in Denver operate differently than the printers at sea level. And so in order to do that, you need connected products. And so all the telemetry is coming into headquarters, and we're able to keep the printers running this way. And so this is a suite of printers that we've commercialized at the company Carbon. And this is not an AI image. This is a real image. You have to say those things now, right? This is one of our factories in China actually, not our factories, our customers' factories. This is a producer of Adidas running shoes in China. And I've got a video on the newest hardware. So you get the point of having automated hardware allows us to be run all day long. And that's really valuable. So that's a little bit about the process and the hardware. Let me talk a little bit about the chemistry. How many people have bought epoxy glue at your local Walmart? And what does the packaging look like? It's like two containers, right? Usually with one plunger, maybe two containers. They get the stoichiometry right. This is step growth polymerization chemistry, and it's all weighed out to, even engineers could do the chemistry. And I say that as an engineer and a chemist. But that's how you get most great polymer properties. Light is not a good way to make most polymers, but it's a good way to shape a polymer. So we basically developed orthogonal chemistry. So we have chemistry that's going to go on with light, and then we have other chemistry that's going to go on by that mixture. And they can run independent of one another, so they're orthogonal. And so just to show you one chemistry slide here, we basically are going to have about 10 volume percent, and only about 10 volume percent of the chemistry is light sensitive, free radically activated. And that will set the shape of the part. So we'll print a part, and it's mechanically not very strong. It's fairly weak. And then we get the excess resin off the part. And then we induce the second stage chemistry, here epoxy chemistry. And it's basically a solid state polymerization in the form of the part. And that's how you get great material properties. So we basically broke it into two problems. Shape the part with light and do a second stage solid state polymerization. And this works like a champ. And this is how we get amazing properties in lots of different areas. And so I want to just quickly show you some products. Adidas running shoes. There's another great video here.
When we first started with the idea of future practice, because it's a guidance, it's set up on a path. It's a mindset and it's a philosophy to try things. We're always bringing in new influences, new ideas, new collaborations. 3D printing, for example, was one of these new technologies that really had unlimited possibilities. The initial problem was, okay, can we actually make a running shoe out of 3D printing material that really works and works well? So when we started thinking about doing 3D printing, we wanted to use liquids because liquids give you the most flexibility in material design. I think of light as a chisel. Light triggers the solidification of the liquid, but oxygen inhibits it. That allows us to have the object grow.
What's really interesting about this collaboration with carbon is we're seeing convergence of a completely new manufacturing technology.
We're going to scale it with the best industrial partner in business.
We're able to deliver tens of thousands and move into hundreds of thousands and into the tens of millions. Now that's clear in front of us. We have this amazing opportunity to innovate the printing process. The liquid rising
And growing in that context can give you new design thoughts you've never had before and new performance capabilities that wouldn't be possible by traditional manufacturing.
this three-dimensional mesh structure, it's a lattice, it's a matrix, it's a web of individual elements. Each one of those little elements is tuned specifically for a purpose.
These lattice structures behave quite differently than anything we've dealt with before. They're much different than phones. Now we have every individual area of the shoe to work with, which is a completely new horizon for us and a new venture.
If you really want to make a shoe that's a size 9, that same shoe for someone who's 180 pounds versus 100 pounds has got to be different.
We can go in within every single cell and engineer that exact cell to do exactly what the consumer needs it to do just for them.
That's fascinating. That's going to change how we create products and certainly how consumers experience products. And I think that's how we see something like Futurecraft 4D playing into the life of an athlete. I would say this is just the very beginning, and it sounds silly and cliche, but who knows, man? I don't know what's next, and that's what's great about going to work every day.
Adidas is great at marketing.
I just.
Yeah, so it's coming out in all different brands now, in different types of shoes. These were just launched. The whole shoe's printed now, and it's been a lot of fun. And when I spoke in that video back in 2017, tens of thousands to hundred thousands to tens of millions, I was speaking it into existence. We weren't close to those numbers, but we knew we could. We knew it was fundamentally probable, but we had a lot of work to do. And we were literally in the thousands at that point. So that talks a lot about, projecting something of where you can go. And now we're in the tens of millions. And when you think about that kind of conversion, the shoes, when they first launched, were $300 a pair. And all the chemicals were bought at low volumes and they were expensive. But as you get to larger volumes, you knew where the math was going to go. And so it's trajectory, having the trajectory to understand those dynamics. Now you can buy them for less than $100 a pair. And at less than $100 a pair, you can sell 50 million shoes a year. Those sorts of things. These products are going in a lot of different places now. Just about every NFL player's got helmets where the liner is made with the technology. And I got a couple more clips here. I'll come back to some of those. Dental is one of the biggest markets. And dentures is in particular one. So there's tens of millions of Americans without any teeth. And over 100 million missing a tooth. This is a $14 billion market. And it's actually the product I'm most proud of because it's a huge part of upward mobility in society. If you don't have your teeth, it's hard to get a job, it's hard to speak properly, eat properly, or oral health is a big part of coronary health. It's a really big deal. The VA is the largest provider of dentures in the United States. And I don't know if you've ever seen dentures made. This is the way they're made. They're handcrafted. They're expensive. And it typically takes 8 chairside visits to get them right. Because you try them on, they get adjusted, but you just look at this process. And I want you to watch this process because you just get a sense of this is how it's done. And again, it's 8 chairside visits. And I was given this talk up at MIT, and one of the department chairs there, she started crying during my talk here, and because her mother's got Parkinson's disease and she lost her dentures, and she had to go back into that chair 8 times. And it's a huge toll on people to get this done and get these milled. But there's a better way. And here's a description.
For the last 45 years of delivering dentures or longer, there was always an unknown. When patients are looking for a denture, the biggest complaint is that they don't fit.
And think of denture making as a craft. I need a craftsperson. And carbon can do it.
Taking a lot and making it less is what a mill is. Taking nothing and making it something is what a printer is. We don't want to make molds, we don't want to make jigs, we want to make final products. And when you make final products for the milling process, it is far less economical than when you make final products from the printing process.
There's 3 basic things. There's fit, there's comfort, and there's function. 3D printing brings all of those together. The accuracies and fit, comparatively speaking to what was done even 5 years ago, has become so much higher in impact for patients and for clinicians across the country.
For something that makes dentures day to day, it's transitional, it's transformative. A lab powered by carbon will allow me to make probably the best denture ever made.
My first immediate denture that I did was with a patient that, and Betty, I mean, I was still kind of a newbie with this digital workflow and the whole process, and needless to say, models matched, everything went like clockwork perfectly. She comes back 24 hours for her post-op, and she's standing in front of this big mirror we have in the office, and she looks at herself, and we're looking at her like, Betty, you are beautiful. And she just starts to cry. And I'm like, my whole office, we're just like all holding our breath because she's staring at her face with her beautiful teeth. And then next she says, no one's ever told me.
So it's all done with intraoral scanning. Impressions, if you have, some people still do impressions and they get digitally scanned, but they're all done with a wand now. I'll pass one around. Don't get wigged out, it's not mine. But the teeth printed separate from the base. We got 5 different color bases. Sometimes you put ceramic teeth in there too, sort of a la carte, but it's transformative. It's significantly cheaper and it's the same materials made better and made more accurately. It's really transformative. And the new resins now are this dual cure resins give you the mechanical properties and now do partial dentures, removable partial dentures. And this is the biggest part of the market. So the advances in materials open up these kinds of constructs. And we've got the entire portfolio now to cover this entire market. So just to walk you through that, I'm going to skip that video. Helmets and head protection. This is me reliving the glory days of high school football. Your head gets scanned. They're bespoke products. Software creates the scan. The lattices are generated by finite element analysis models tied to mechanical properties of elastomers. Helmets get ranked. They actually get ranked by the NFL at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech does all the rankings. It's an amazing facility. 7 out of all the top helmets are made with our technology. And at the NFL, they're bespoke. This started off as a small market. They do 250,000 helmets now a year. So it's really gotten into peewee and the whole 9 yards, pun intended. And again, back to the video and the positioning. I thought being here at Arkansas, I got to show this video here. If you love football,
So much more than that. It's the hope of 2 small towns separated by a patch of grass under lights on Friday. It's generations of families who sing the fight songs, wearing the right shade of red. It's the cold of aluminum bleachers and the heat of century-old rivalries. It's the 2-a-days in August and the sting of catching a pass in January. It's 53 players who unite cities of millions. It's discipline, teamwork, respect, and overcoming adversity. It's the immaculate reception. It's the Music City miracle. Don't call it a game. It's 5 million players from Pee Wee to first round draft picks. Protect them, and you protect it all.
so this is, I get goosebumps. Eagle season ticket holder here. So love all this. There's my team there. But yeah, this is now gone all the way. And there's stock helmets, and it's really profoundly going in lots of different areas. Ice hockey's adopted it. The airflow through the helmets. A lot about enhanced human performance by cooling the hands and the head and the feet. And this is where a lot of this is coming now. It's enhanced human performance related to cooling and thermal control. Skip some of those details. Bicycle saddles. I know you guys do a lot of mountain biking here, and Specialized, 7 of the top 10 Tour de France bicyclists were on these saddles from Specialized or Deep Royale. 20% less maximum force on the sit bones by these designs than you could with foam. And it's got airflow. And I won't go into too much detail, but there's nothing like airflow through your seat. It's really eye-opening. And and in other areas where this matters medically.
I've never had to. But when you have to live in a chair all day, every day, you need to be comfortable, not hungry. It's a nice addition to life.
My name is Brian Minnick. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Cool Seat Company. We developed the world's most advanced seating systems. When we started the Cool Seat Company, we realized there was a gap in existing technology. Through our development cycle and research, we identified carbon as a suitable candidate to replace foam. And so with the Cool Seat technology, we've been able to address some of those concerns.
We got a sample pack from carbon. It wasn't until I held it in my hand that I was like, oh, this is it. This is what I'm gonna make a seat out of. I've been on a variation of a Cool Seat for the last 4 years, and I don't want to sit on anything else.
What I found with the Cool Seat was it didn't take long to bring in. It contoured very well to my profile, and then it stayed there.
I've been on this cushion at least 2 years. I've traveled the world, I've been all over the place. In that time, I've been on this, I've never had to worry. It's very comfortable, but it's also very stable. If I get a push, I get a stronger push because my body's not shifting as I'm on it.
Quality of life is why we started this company. The end user has to make so many choices of what they can do throughout their day, and having to think about your cushion or how long you can be on it or the restrictions it has. And you want to eliminate that concern from the user, so it's one less thing to have to worry about.
You literally forget the benefits of not having to think about that piece of equipment. In fact, in mind is quite free, which is something that I have yet to experience in any other piece of equipment I use.
We actually started designing in-house our own lattice structure. And in that journey, we found carbon and found the design engine that carbon offers, and found that to be the ultimate solution for this type of product. So we've been able to make multiple iterations of seat systems that address all the needs that we've identified. The design engine process has been amazing. We design everything in-house in rapid prototype. We can see products within a week of design iterations. So it's totally allowed us to in-house design, develop, and test products that are ready for production. So we've really been able to tune the carbon technology to meet the needs of the end user.
With a Cool Seat backrest holds you in place, but it also moves with you.
I felt more locked into my chair. Felt like I was sitting in my cushion and not on my cushion. It just allows freedom of movement.
For me, it's saving time. It adapts to my lifestyle. To have a cushion that they got to you was a big game changer.
It's a no maintenance, set it and forget it seating system that truly works.
The environment that carbon's created to allow small companies such as us to embark on a journey like this. It traditionally wouldn't be possible in conventional manufacturing. Without carbon technology, this is impossible.
So what I wanted to you to see here is this, there's a tenet in entrepreneurship called in Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm, about the bowling alley. You know, what is that first bowling pin you want to knock over? That cascades into the other pins. It started with Adidas running shoes, right? Great brand, visibility, expensive products in the beginning, but as scale grew, then the cost came down and allowed other things to fall. And so, you know, then bicycle saddles and helmets and now seating, and now it's going even further into high volume consumer products. And so these, and back to the tenants, and this is probably the most engineered lattice and material we've got. This lattice, this resin's got air in it. And so it's very lightweight lattice, and it's breathable. And there's major products being launched now this holiday season, getting ready for this holiday season in this marketplace. And then what's happening is these markets grow, costs are coming down, and it really opens up. And these particular printers, most of these products are fabricated in Sri Lanka, so you have to think about your global supply chain. So there'll be like 1,000 printers going into Sri Lanka just because this is where these products are made. Shoes are made in Southeast Asia. And so it's really interesting sort of dynamics going forward here. So that was one of the tenets I wanted you to see in this sort of cascade of products as you open things up. So as was mentioned, I started off at Carolina and NC State. I led the company for 6 years. My son's a CEO. I got my life back as a professor. I stayed on the West Coast. I'm on the board of National Geographic, and I chair the board of my alma mater, Science College. And I got a chance to restart my academic career. And you sort of think about what is where you're gonna play, how are you gonna win, what's next? And the thing I fell in love with at Carbon was manufacturing and where manufacturing is done and those that do manufacturing. And so started thinking about, well, what's going on in the academy that was of interest. And there's a lot of amazing things happening in the universities, and the things that I really treasure are some next generation products. And there's a lot of things happening in wearables and tissue engineering, sensors, medical technologies. And what's also clear to me that the tools that we use in academia to prove a point, the manufacturing tools, the fabrication tools, are really great at making one-offs. But there's probably no danger of scale up because the tools used don't have those capabilities. They're often direct write tools. And back to what I said is you don't buy stuff you can't make. It's going to be hard to think about these actually becoming products without better manufacturing tools. So I began to think a lot about what we did with making things with light at a resolution of 75 microns, powering macroscopic objects. And, I landed in Silicon Valley, which is making things from 1 micron down to single digit nanometers. But there's a really interesting gap of making things between 1 and 1,000 microns that I thought, why don't we mine this area? So again, back to how does one think about strategy and research? I identified this gap in making things with light in 3D, because in 2D is the microelectronics world. And a wafer is in process for about 4 months in a fab. And it takes like 30 steps per layer. There's only about 7 layers of metal in a top end chip nowadays. They're very precise in the XY direction, and very thin in the Z direction. But we do things macroscopically. We need tens of thousands of layers because they're bigger. You can only have 1 step per layer. And you got to think about the Z-axis more than you do in many ways than electronics. And so we decided to jump into this gap. And now with my engineering students at Stanford, we decided we're going to build printers now that have very high resolution in the XY plane. And that's pretty easy to think about because you just put more pixels per unit area, and that's done with optics and software. And we were immensely successful at that. So this is a 75 micron resolution printer that we did at Carbon. And then my students started building printers down to 30 micron resolution. And then see that little guy right there? We built printer with 1.5 micron resolution using the same chemistry and physics of the clip process with that oxygen permeable window, okay? But don't look too closely because it's not really good in the Z-axis, which is what we need to do for 3D printing. I'll come back to that. And we figured that out by actually integrating. Let me show one slide on that. More of a technical audience than sometimes I get, and yeah. So we developed a process where we're basically going to be injecting resin through the part. Not what I wanted to do. 1 second. Apologize for this. So instead of the resin coming in from the periphery, like I showed you, we're now going to be mechanically pushing resin through the platform through a microfluidic channel that we designed into the CAD file of the part. And now we're mechanically pushing resin into that gap. That changes the fluid mechanics dramatically. Now we have a positive pressure under the part instead of a negative pressure. And this opens up the printer to go another factor of 10 faster, high viscosity resins. And you just see that we're basically pumping resin into this gap. And we just basically, all we're doing is modifying the platform. The printers are the same. And now we have fluidic channels through the platform, through the part. And it gets us another factor of 10 in speed because the process is mass transfer limited. And by pushing resin into this gap, it's now faster because the chemistry can go faster. I'll skip that. And there's a lot of fundamental physics that are different. But you can just see how now we can load up even different resins and do multi-material printing. So we have different colored resins, different kinds of resins, and we've integrated this with software. And now we do multi-material printing. Thumbs up there from Gabriel. And now this opens up all these different kinds of processes. And here's multi-material printing, doing different colors and different chemistries in different regions, and the printers can go faster. And what the key is, though, is you push resin through the part, it keeps the negative space open because the resin's got oxygen in it. And so it solves the z-axis resolution problem. And we showed late a year or two ago that we can now do for the first time 3D printing of microfluidic structures using light. Microfluidics have all been 2D. And all the channels are rectilinear because you're using like SU8 and molding technologies. Now we're doing free-form structures using light at the micron scale. Well, what can you do with that? Well, we love, trying to recapitulate the vascular structure for blood supply. And we've invented a technology we call CAST, where we basically 3D print a water-soluble polymer into a very sophisticated lattice. We surround that lattice with a medium of cells and culture media, and we dissolve out that lattice. And then we perfuse that structure with perfusates that are oxygen laden, including blood and synthetic blood. And we develop the tools to measure the oxygen transport through the block. And what we can find out is what do you need to do to keep cells alive? And we start looking at live dead zones, and lo and behold, cells need to be within 100 to 300 microns of a blood vessel to get the oxygen. That's the way we're designed, and that's what's needed here. So we're measuring the oxygen needed to get to support these. And if you've got cells that consume lots of oxygen, like cardiomyocytes, you have to feed it more than some other cells that don't have such oxygen demand. And so we're now mapping out the oxygen load required by different cell types and what kind of vascular structure different tissue types need from a fundamental point of view regarding oxygen replenishing. Okay. So we're having a lot of fun with this. And we're beginning to also keep other kinds of cells alive, like islets and beta cells. And so can we get into devices that can impart glycemic function control? By encapsulating islets and beta cells in these kinds of structures. And this is where that's going. Where else can we do microscopic printing that would be of value? And we've been enamored with the microneedle space for a long time. And in particular, for vaccine delivery. And what's really interesting is that the dermis of our skin has 100 times more of the immune cells than your muscle does. And the dendritic antigen presenting cells, which is the target for vaccines. And in many ways, when we all get needles and we push the vaccine into the muscle, we're missing where most of the cells are. And what's interesting is microneedles were designed a long time ago, but they were designed using the tools of the electronics industry, etching silicon. And then we and others started molding microneedles using imprint lithography tools. It opened up new materials, but the shapes were still the same because you had master templates etched in silicon. And now we call these Gen 3. These are 3D printed microneedles. And now you combine microneedles with microfluidics, we call those Gen 4. And so this opens up the ability to think about new kinds of delivery mechanisms into the skin. And one of these here was these microneedles, happened to be during COVID, so it was really good timing. But what we found is you can deliver a vaccine into the dermis, the same amount of vaccine, the same amount of the vaccine into the dermis, so you can get a 50-fold increase in antibody response. There's a huge dose sparing. You don't have to deliver as much vaccine to have a really strong response. And now with these new high surface area needles, we can actually trap liquids into that space in the needles through surface tension. And you can now deliver liquids through a microneedle into the skin. Or more interestingly, you could freeze dry that liquid, lyophilize it in the needles. Why would you want to have a dry vaccine? Doesn't need to be refrigerated, right? Remember all the issues of storage, of refrigerators during COVID. And what happens is you can push these vaccine products into a moist environment, and that moisture can dissolve out those products. So we've got big programs with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for doing this for vaccine delivery. We're also combining this with microfluidics. And you think about the GLP-1 drugs, and you think about peptide delivery. A lot of biologicals, antibodies, proteins, and the like, they can't be co-formulated. Each of these biologics have their own pKa. Their secondary, tertiary structures are delicately balanced, and sometimes when you mix them, they aggregate and precipitate. But everybody wants a co-deliver now. Well, co-delivering and mixing means you have to do stability studies for the mixture and every different stoichiometry that's out there, which, 12 months, 18 months of stability. What about if you could co-deliver without co-formulating? So keep them physically separate, but now each have their own microfluidic channels to co-deliver. And you can vary, and you only have to do the stability studies of the individual components. So we are delivering all different types of vaccines into the skin. We have human surrogate skin doing messenger reporter genes. We working with the SARS-CoV-2. This is a self-amplifying RNA replicon type vaccine. We're doing measles and rubella with the Gates Foundation. We thought this was a third world vaccination. Now it's back here in the United States in a significant way. So delivering the live attenuated vaccines. And we just got renewed by the Gates Foundation. So we got a big program in this space. Okay, last topic. How many people have heard of Theranos? Maybe they had it right, except for the fraud. And they went after the wrong circulation system. They went after blood. We are interested in interstitial fluid, the clear fluid in our bodies. So let's look at this a little more carefully. We're 60% water as humans. 2/3 of that fluid is in our cells. 1/3 is outside of our cells. We have 3 times as much of that clear fluid in our bodies than we do blood. 3 times as much. And it's really interesting from a chemical engineering point of view, the physiology of a human. And I'm sort of looking at this from the outside. And clearly, people are delivering drugs into this space and sampling this space. You think about all the GLP-1 drugs going into the sub-Q. You think about continuous glucose monitoring, which took 40 years and $40 billion of investment to measure one molecule reliably. So it's a little daunting. But you think about this, and you think about the body. So the average adult now has about 20 liters of the clear fluid supplied into this interstitial space per day from your blood supply. And about 17 liters of that gets reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. That excess 3 liters gets pushed into these lymphatic vessels. So there's a pressure gradient from your blood supply through this, where all your cells are. Your cells are not bathed in blood. blood is off on a high, bless you, blood is often a highway. Hundreds of microns away, which I just showed you. You just need to get the oxygen there. It's not bathing your cells. Your cells are bathed in this fluid. Your cells are communicating. They're shedding molecules. They're shedding nucleic acids, right? And it eventually transports into these lymphatic vessels. Lymphatic vessels, there's no pump, there's no heart. It's all check valves. And as you breathe and walk, squeezes, goes to the next domain, check valve, stops it flow backwards. It all works its way up. And it bathes all your cells and has lots of communication molecules in the interstitial fluid space. And interestingly, your interstitial fluid is gathered, 85% of it, your lower body, your left thorax, your left arm, left side of your head, all dumps into the lymphatic duct, and it drips into the venous stream, into the venous side of the bloodstream, where it then goes off into a highway. The other 15%, the right thorax, right side of the head, right arm, drips into the right lymphatic duct, into the bloodstream. And it's really rich in molecules. You see lots of all the molecules you'd think about that are important in life. They're at different concentrations than they are in blood. And what's really interesting is they're amazingly different concentrations. Take nucleic acids, for example. There's about 12 times more exosomes found in interstitial fluid than in blood. Exosomes are often the little cargo containers for DNA and RNA. When you think about one of the hottest areas in science right now for oncology is circulating tumor DNA, ctDNA. That's often, when they say that, you should think people are saying blood. And it's all collected in blood. Well, your blood is get loaded up with nucleases that chew up DNA. The half-life of ctDNA in blood is about an hour and a half. But it takes a long time to get there, and the concentration of nucleases in interstitial fluid is really low. So it's there much longer. And so when you think about oncology, there's something called an opportunity window. When you find the disease, how quickly can you fix it? Ovarian cancer starts on the edge of the fallopian tubes. And people talk about it a year or two before it gets to the ovaries, at which time it metastasizes in about 2 weeks. It's too late. You got to catch it earlier. You need to open up the window. The earlier you find things, the bigger the opportunity window to do something about it. Bless you. So we are really eager to do this. But now, collecting this interstitial fluid has been a nightmare. Nobody does it. Nobody's had their interstitial fluid collected. I have. Because we've invented new techniques for doing that. And you look at the techniques for doing it, it's a complicated thing. Even though it's there 3 times as much as your blood. Blood's easier to collect, but it's got its own drawbacks. People have been talking about microneedles for doing this for a while, but they haven't had much success. Because it's hard to make what you want to make. It's hard to make microfluidic microneedles. But now we can. And so we just published this paper late last year in a new design that uses Darcy's law, the fundamentals of collecting groundwater. And we've applied this technique, and we've done all the computer simulations for showing this. And we basically, and then we've entered humans at Stanford. We wanted to measure the pain scores. So from 0 to 10, it's a 1.2. It doesn't hurt. You feel it, but it doesn't hurt because it's above the nerve endings in your skin. We collect, on average, 15 milligrams of interstitial fluid in 5 minutes. This is substantially higher than anything in the literature. And there's lots of different kinds of molecules, and we're beginning to mine all the different molecules. We started with mass spectrometry, a known technique. We see about half the protein load in interstitial fluid than you do blood. Blood's got a lot of albumin in it. But the distribution outside that is really broad. We see over 3,000 proteins by mass spectrometry. And we see 149 proteins associated with early cancer detection. We see PSA. We see PSA in forearm dermal interstitial fluid. So there's some interesting transport stuff I don't want to dive into right now. But we see all the cancer markers. We see lots of tissue-specific proteins. We see a lot of cell surface markers, a lot of extracellular proteins, a lot of different cytokines, and all the immunoglobulins. So we're beginning to mine this now. And the challenge with that first device is you had to hold it on for 5 minutes. It wasn't that convenient. We had to have a person do it for you, right? So we've got a new device that we're making. It's all 3D printed. And I don't have the needles in here. We just got this IRB approved. So basically, it's a 3D printed device. The connectors between this button are all designed of a certain diameter and a certain number based on the material properties of the 3D printed resin, so that a certain force will fracture and give you a certain velocity to push the microneedles into the skin. And it just punctures the skin. And we do that with a guide and then we have to hold pressure on it. But now what we want to do is basically you put this in, and now we're using a vacuum instead of pressure. So these are dirt cheap. They're sold by Beck and Dickinson. It's what they use to collect blood. You just put that into this device. You peel off the adhesive. Put this on your arm. Make a really good seal, because that's important for us. And listen to the click. That's all the force needed. It's calculated. We've got paper on that. Then you insert the vacuum, and it engages the needle. And now that's the delta pressure for collecting interstitial fluid. You can wear this for about 5 minutes. You collect that to 15 milligrams. We think this is going to be, and then when you break the seal, the air flows and pulls that into the collection device. It doesn't get collected in here, it gets collected in a little pellet before this. This is just a pressure rate. And we think this could be done, obviously, at home. We think this could be done while you're doing the shopping. We think this could be done, where you're right before an athletic event. You think it's so convenient, you can do it during an athletic event and immediately after an athletic event. There's so much to mine here with collecting these. It's much more convenient. And when you get molecular information at this high frequency, and you can combine this with imaging technologies, and we're working with a lot of different types of new imaging technologies at Stanford. I'm trying to help my colleagues bring on whole body skin cancer detection system. That's like walking through a TSA booth. We're using low cost optics, AI, image stitching together. We have a big program to do magnetic resonance imaging as an alternative to X-ray mammography. High throughput, using a blanket that's got the local coils in it, using a low field 0.55 Tesla magnet instead of the 1/2 or 3T Tesla, and no contrast, using diffusion weighted imaging, MR. When you combine molecular imaging or molecular analysis with imaging, and you stitch that together with AI, this is the future of medicine, right? These are the pipes that collect the data. AI can tell you what the treatment plan is, or what the diagnosis is, or how to stay healthier, all those things. It's really a powerful, I think we're in a really exciting time period. So at Stanford, we just got a new IRB study approved for Alzheimer's. We see the p-tau217 protein in this interstitial fluid. This is an early marker for Alzheimer's. And so you put people in the right regimen. The sooner you see the onset, your treatment probably will change. A lot of cancer therapies are late stage cancer therapies. As you get earlier, you're going to treat things differently. And so this whole idea of early detection and what the treatment plan should be opens up, but it's this power of seeing things earlier, more thoroughly, powered by AI is really what we think the future is. So let me end there. I'm really fortunate to have a great group of students with a lot of different disciplines. The convergence of disciplines is the key, as you all know. It used to be your I-shaped people are just really deep in a subject, and maybe T-shaped or deep, but can collaborate. Now it's cone-shaped and pie-shaped. You've got to be deep in multiple disciplines. If you're going to do vaccines, you need to know material science, physiology, immunology, and that's what's so exciting today. It's probably appropriate this group's getting photographed in front of Alcatraz. I got a great group of collaborators, interventionalists, chemical engineers, fluid mechanics, analytical chemists, cardiologists doing cabbage surgeries, people treating type 1 diabetes, just so many different disciplines coming together, cancer. The team at Carbon really showed the way to commercializing 3D printing at scale. And at the end of the day, I'm a big fan of making things with light. It powers the entire microelectronics industry in 2D. And I think 3D is going to catch up and will be the way to make things. And it really disrupts supply chains too. The ability to do all sorts of onshoring and the like. So think about this bowling alley concept. Where you're going to play, and what's that first pin, think strategically, how you're going to cascade that out. And leave you with that thought, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. This absolutely fascinating talk with so many areas to be covered. And yeah, we do some 3D printing, but this is a whole new different thing. So questions?
Okay, fantastic talk. I'm very inspired and very excited to listen to this talk. So I'm working in manufacturing, so I wonder what is the biggest challenge in manufacturing in your opinion? So you seems like you are mainly working on those polymers. What about other inorganic materials? How do you see the trend for future development for commercialization?
Yeah. So I decided to focus on healthcare here for sure. But one of the hottest areas I think for us too is in the inorganics. So let's see here. So we're doing a lot of pyrolysis. So these are polymers that get pyrolyzed to advance inorganic materials. If I can, yeah, right here. Get this out of the way. Yeah. So we are doing so these are organic polymers. So you heard about carbon fiber.
Yes.
Carbon fiber is made from polyacrylonitrile, organic polymer. It's made as a fiber. It's got a very high surface area. You can heat that up under anaerobic conditions, remove all the hydrogen and nitrogen, and it's carbon fiber. And it's oriented. Nobody pyrolyzes three-dimensional objects because you can't get the gases out. You need a high surface area. This is like a stitched fiber, three-dimensional object. We have the surface area. So we started pyrolyzing these now, and we're designing materials that basically become carbon, elemental carbon, graphite. And you can see these objects, they're all graphitic. And we're doing triply periodic minimal surfaces, gyroid-like structures, all made out of carbon. These are being used from electrodes for batteries. We got a big DOE grant in that space. And the newest one just came out this past week. These are targets for nuclear fusion, which fell in our lab. It's kind of funny. I'm talking about like sampling blood and doing nuclear fusion. But that's what's fun being at Stanford. But the National Ignition Facility in the United States pounds deuterium, hydrogen, deuterium, tritium with 196 lasers in a little pellet. And that gives off more energy than it took to power the lasers. It does nuclear fusion. And this is what the targets look like. We're 3D printing the targets. These become sponges for hydrogen and deuterium. And a utility scale reactor, excuse me, will be pulsing these pellets at a frequency of 1 hertz. So about 85,000 particles a day hit with lasers pulsed on that target, getting energy each plume. That's how this is going to work for next generation nuclear energy, the fusion. and they need targets. So this is carbon. We also put in silicon and other refractory elements. We make refractory materials, silicon carbide, silicon oxycarbide. We're putting catalysts in there to do other kind of, hydroformulations, sort of chemical engineering, catalyst stuff. We don't do metals. My daughter is the head of marketing for SLM Solutions, which is one of the leading metal 3D printing companies. So I know some about it, but would be another area. So there's organics, inorganics, ceramics, metals. I think there's lots of opportunity in all these areas.
Thank you.
Yeah. More of an answer than you wanted there.
Great presentation.
There must be a reputation here. You didn't even raise your hand. She knew the mic was coming to you. So.
I'm Jeff Jewett. I'm the prototyping and fabrication manager here. Fantastic presentation. I leaned over to Mike when we first started and I said, he's speaking my language.
Okay.
So my initial questions are, you stated carbon has about 50 different materials. What's kind of the driving factor for you to formulate a new material? Is that based on carbon's research and what you think the market needs, or is that a lot where people come to you and say, we want this type of formulation?
Yeah, it's actually not that complicated. So you can look at where are all the polymers sold today and what are the properties associated with those polymers? And are they the markets that are amenable to 3D printing? That's the calculus that we do first. That's what chose the first 3 resins. And nobody's doing elastomers. Where the gap, and we had people were 3D printing sneakers before we got into this space, but the materials are crappy. They were sintered. And when you do powder sintering and you have a tight lattice, you can get all that powder out because it's a block of powder. And I asked the CEO of a big shoe company, how are you guys get all the powder out of your lattices? And he said, interns. That's not a good answer. So liquids lend itself to that. So we choose based on our perception of what's needed and where we could win. And then that bowling alley idea, elastomers triggered now everything for us. That's 40% of our business. We now have rigid materials coming out, and that really hits the automotive industry. And so these become like, Ford and GM become reference industries for lots of other industries. And so we've got epoxies, we got flame retardant epoxies. So we're driven by that. And then we try to stay away from the FDA historically, because the regulatory hurdles, you don't want to start there because you're not going to make any money for a long time, if ever. But now we're moving into that space. And the first foray into medical was dental. The bar is the lowest for dental products. And dentures is a $14 billion market that's going to go all digital. So we have some, it's done with some strategery based on unmet needs, regulatory, those kind of things.
In terms of your lattice structures that you do too, are you using your own proprietary software that does that, or are you using?
We've offered it because it was needed in the marketplace tied to our resins, but we use a lot of third-party software.
Okay.
And topology and others.
Last one from me on the helmet lattice structures. What percentage, like if someone took the same hit with and without one of those, how much does it reduce the force on say the brain?
So it's complicated. We actually had a big debate whether we were going to get into this field because of liabilities. And I was like, we're going to help. If we can help them, we're help. And it starts with the material. So you can make a rubber ball out of 2 of our different elastomers. One is a highly damping polymer, where the TV is close to the user. So the idea is you drop a rubber ball, you drop it on the table, bounces back up, happy ball. We got other balls that drop to the table and sit on. So that's a molecular mechanism of energy dissipation between a molecule because the TV is close to the use spectrum. Then you fold in lattices, which dissipate rotational impacts and the like. That's what the software comes. So you have materials choice, you have lattice choice, and then Riddell's got lots of data from different positions. There's actually 5 positional helmet designs. Line hits differently than other players. The helmets are designed, elastics are designed, and then you need a perfectly fitted helmet. The spoke parts, all the stuff layers in. And that's how that field has emerged. So, sort of tangential to your question, but that's how we've layered those components. Okay.
Okay, Jimmy, and then you need to talk into the mic so that people on Zoom can hear you, and the microphone for you is at your computer.
I'm coachable. That's good.
Great. Well, thanks so much. Couple of questions. One is about the vaccines that you talked about with microneedles and the dry vaccines and the dependence on the dry vaccine. Is that something that is work that's happening independently and you're designing a delivery system, or is it work that is integrated, that these dry vaccines that are being developed are, sort of coordinated or require your delivery system?
We're trying to integrate it. It's both. So these are our new ones. This just got funded by the Gates Foundation yesterday. This is a triply periodic minimal surface. So how do we get vaccines to release very quickly? But the triply periodic minimal surface has got the highest surface area per unit volume. We 3D print these, so it's got a wetting. So and then watch this video. It does wicking. So, all right, we see this as like, okay, we're going to make stuff happen with this now. So we fill our needles with vaccines this way, and then we lyophilize that. But there's also a great structure to grab more interstitial fluid too, in combination with the delta pressure. So we're now massively going down. So we're making things that are unmakeable, and we see something like wicking in a microneedle platform that's can wick through the whole thing. And so, I wasn't sure exactly what you meant by your question, but the point is, we have got a delivery program, we have an extraction program, and sometimes they cost money. Because if you can fill liquids this way, there's a better way to fill your needles. We also do inkjet printing behind, we fill with liquids by an inkjet printer too. Picoliter dispensing systems that are optically guided. And then you put different materials in different needles. So if you think like the Prevnar vaccines, which is like 20 different vaccine products, you can put different ones in different needles at different levels, different amounts, and you don't have to mix them.
So these that you're showing here, and you're talking about a liquid, or I was asking about the dry vaccine.
Well, then we would lyophilize this.
Okay. All right. So
after it's in the structure.
And is that dependent upon the type of vaccine, whether or not that lyophilization works?
Yeah.
Well?
Yes, totally. We can screw up everything.
Okay.
Yes. And so we're trying to, so cotton candy dissolves quickly in your mouth. So that's an amorphous glass of sugar. And how you air dry that versus freeze dry, there are different ways. So we are looking at ways of rapidly dissolving solids that are formulations for active ingredients that are co-formulated in that. And so my students are doing dissolution studies with different material matrices designed to stabilize and quickly dissolve.
One more quick question about you. I think you said with the dentures that you're using the same materials that are being used currently.
They're methacrylate, the same class of materials.
Same class of materials.
But they're photochemically cured instead of like a mixture. Yeah.
Gustav Ganguly, I'm a faculty here at IQBA. Fascinating talk. We work on chronic respiratory diseases. So I was interested for the ISF sampler that you have. So how can we access that? Is it commercially available? We can get access because we have established cohorts, longitudinal cohorts too.
So I love this question. We're getting it a lot. this paper just came out. We've got a lot of inbound. We got a lot of inbound interest, Stanford, and then everywhere else. Apparently, everyone's been wanting to look at interstitial fluid, and so we got to figure this out. I'm not sure. I got a bag full here. Yeah. Then I won't have my demos. My students are making them. We have formed a company to help provide them. It's just a sampling device. The real hard part and the really interesting part is what you do. And so we just want to help you be able to do those things by providing a simple way of collecting. And you think about this for children, it's hard to draw blood out of kids. Elderly is really hard. We actually get more fluid when you're older than younger. And I think it's due with the elasticity of your skin and the fluid mobility within the dermis. So we got to figure that out, and send me an email. We'll see how we can help power what you're thinking about. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, thanks for the talk, really interesting.
You got to be coachable here.
Thanks for the talk. I have tons of questions. I'll prioritize. While we're on this slide, thinking about you have both directions, right? You can sample and you can deliver. Are you thinking about closing that loop, right? So that you have half of your spikes are sampling, the other half are primed to deliver based on some measurement that you can have in that sort of point of care device. Are you thinking in that direction or not necessarily yet?
So I am a disciple of the KISS principle. Right. Keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid.
I won't take that.
No, I'm looking in the mirror. I'm looking in the mirror at myself when I say that. We've got a lot of people interested in doing new generation of continuous molecular modeling wearables. And we'll send them our device. And I remind them it took 40 years and $40 billion to do the CGM. But go chase cortisol that way. Go chase, it's worth doing. It's going to take a while. I think there are ways of thinking about that. The simpler one of that is what happens to interstitial fluid collection if we're pushing one liquid in and pulling it out the other way? Do we get a different kinds of mining? And in particular, docs, and again, I'm learning also, docs feel your neck and about lymph nodes. There's a concept of perinodal lymphatic fluid. That region around those swollen lymph nodes. What's there? What's in that periphery, this perinodal area? So my interventional radiologist folks who spend a lot of time collecting specimens for oncological determinations are interested in more minimally invasive ways of doing that. So we've got a device on the drawing board where it's actually a ring of microneedles in a microfluidic channel that can go around the periphery of a node that's looks like it's subsurface and tap that area for that kind of fluid. And would it be interesting to put some liquid in there and pull it out at the same time in a minimally invasive way? Would be the kinds of things we're thinking about. But I think there's lots you can do. If you can make it, if you can draw it, you can now make it. And so now this is where the innovation process, making things in a way that's scalable, opens up new innovations. So at the end of the day, our tools get out there and allow people to do things. And then and then back to business models too. So our 3D, we own all the 3D printers. It's a subscription model. And this idea came from two modes. When we first launched the company, I did not want our customers mad at us because 3 months later, the hardware was better. How do you get people to join you on a journey when your product's not done? How do you future-proof them from obsolescence? These are all fundamental entrepreneurial tenets. Well, if they don't buy the machine, then they are future-proofed from that kind of big cash outlay. And these printers are expensive because they are censored up in ways that a benchtop, a Formlabs printer is not. Because there's telemetry coming off these things. As I said, the printers in Denver operate differently than printers at sea level because of the atmospheric pressure control of the suction forces. every printer's tuned. And we could not have, you couldn't do that if you didn't have that kind of telemetry. LEDs are drifting in wavelength and intensity. We measure that. How do you do global fine manufacturing? Well, you get the data and you tune every printer. That's how we do this from a Silicon Valley headquarters in 18 different countries. So that's how we do those kinds of things. And so that gives us a relationship with the customer. And then, when I first got into this, all the chemical companies wanted to come in with specialty chemical resins. What that means is they're going to be high priced. They want to be in high margin because they hate selling tank cars. They want to sell high margin resins. I wanted resin priced at tank cars. So there's another fundamental tenet of entrepreneurship called commoditize your complement. The iPhone. What is Apple's complement to the iPhone? It's the apps. They have an app store. They have first-party apps. They have apps that they designed, and then they have third-party apps. They do a rev share on the third-party apps. We set up an app store for resins. We stood up the supply chain on their first resins because there were none that had dual cure capabilities. And we get a reasonable margin for those, 30% or whatever. Then we train chemical companies how to design resins on our platform. We have to do a bunch of physical chemistry measurements to tie it to the software, viscosity, dose to cure, mechanical properties. And then you can have a button show up on your printer that said that resin's properties are tuned with the software. But now we do a rev share. They do the direct shipping. That gets a much better margin profile doing a rev share than us owning the supply chain. And that allows more people to design. So that's why we have 50 resins now. And then, we decide which resins we want to be more vertically integrated or not. So the business model, the take-home message for those that design hardware, make it software controllable. Make it tunable. Build a relationship. Make it always reliable. And often that means software related. And so back to the founding of Carbon, one of the first people I hired, our vice president of engineering, who's now our co-CEO of my son. He's a couple years older than me. I always remind him of that. When he was an undergrad at Stanford, he started a software company that Scott Cook bought and became QuickBooks. And he was at Intuit for 17 years, then in QuickBooks. Took a year off, helped raise his kids. Wanted to get back into the workforce. In Silicon Valley, people start with companies, take time off, and because they're always there. And he's a software guy. He loved the environment. He loved cars, and he joined a little company called Tesla Motors. This is before Elon bought his way in. All right, so no revisionist history here. Elon bought his way in, but then he spent 7 years with Elon. He was a founding VP of engineering at Tesla. He brought the Roadster and the Model S out. And he had enough of Elon, and I stole him. And he started telling me that it's a software play. This is in 2014. I was like, what do you mean? It's a car, it's a battery. No, it's a software play. I didn't fully appreciate it. I said, well, that's what we're trying to do. I stole 50 people from Tesla. Our printers were designed with the same DNA as a Tesla car. It's all cloud-based, integrated hardware, software, mechatronics as a discipline. And this allows us to do precision manufacturing globally with tuned printers in a subscription model. And this is where the business models also come in. I wanted to go out with a 3-year subscription model. And my investors, who were software mostly, said, nobody does 3 years. It's going to be a 1-year deal. I said, Jim, let me try 3. If I can't do 3, I'll go to 1. Well, if I go out with 1, I'll never get to 3. I said, this is manufacturing. People are going to want to have the stability of a relationship. Make a long story short, our average subscription time now is 5.5 years. People don't want prices to be raised. What that also means is we have contractually obligated revenue on these printers for 5 years. There's something in business called revenue with an R, something more valuable called ARR, annual recurring revenue. And that's what we have. And those kind of companies get a higher multiple than those that do revenue. Revenue is in your rearview mirror metric. ARR is a forward projecting metric. And so you couple these business ideas, especially those that design hardware, and think about these relationships and having people join you in a journey when the products aren't ready. You got to think as much innovation about your business model as you do as the technology. And that would be a big take-home message for everybody.
One more now. One more question.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So, my name is Priyanka, I'm an economist. So just want to understand your.
I should have had a warning talking business of economists.
Understand like your process while you were designing it, was that, since it is like hardware agnostic, as you mentioned, and with a subscription model with over the year software updates. So was that the thought process that, when you were designing it, that you want to make it hardware agnostic? And
It's just not, so that's not the right word. It's not, we are not hardware agnostic. We think hardware is the key, but it's powered electronics in a piece of hardware that we own. And and so with that's the pipes. I always think about who owns the pipes. Apple owns the pipes. So AI is going to be commoditized. Nobody's going to make money on AI. Be ready. It's going to be people selling chips, and then pretty soon there's going to be an algorithm, and you won't need as many farms. Don't be too scared out there. I think the world's very dynamic right now, and but AI is going to be commoditized. It's going to be the complement. Who owns the pipes? Well, in healthcare imaging, it's GE and Siemens. They're going to be really good people that do molecular analysis. And I think that the person in a white coat among friends, depending on who's in the room, may I see the dean of the medical school here? AI is going to augment that massively because you got the information. AI is going to tell you what to do with it, what the treatment plan should be. Then there'll be different kinds of docs that implement that, interventionists and all this. So it's really interesting how things are going to be changed dramatically with information and AI, with where the pipes are owned. Yeah.
One last question. Another group coming in here.
So, as a professor, and you finally have this so much vividness. So I wonder, like, if you have any suggestion or more detailed story on this commercialization to lab technology, and how do you find a team to run the company?
Well, yeah, that's the hardest part. That's the hardest part. So I grew up academically in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, which, I love RTP, North Carolina. And I thought we could always compete with Silicon Valley and Highway 128 in Boston. And for molecular technologies, North Carolina is very competitive. As we got into hardware and integrated mechatronics, it was going to be harder to hire people that did this for the third or fourth time. And it's really much better to have people on your team that have done this for the third or fourth time, like the Tesla experience at Carbon. And that's why, I think, the challenges in different markets regarding how to do stuff and commercialize stuff. And, I'm a big believer in partnerships and bridges. And how do we bring communities together that can bridge back? And I think there are use cases that each region also brings. For example, as we think about liquid biopsies, we want to be able to that's why we're driven by cost and at-home care. AI is going to be a community bridge to lots of people. How do you deliver this MR, magnetic resonance imaging, alternative X-ray mammography into rural communities versus densely populated communities? And so you got to set yourselves up so you got different use cases if you really want to make an impact. And so you got to find bridges to densely populated and non-densely populated areas and build, or different demographics, different population disparities are going to be really, this whole cancer, the whole body skin cancer thing we're looking at, all the different skin types are going to be important. So all these things, if you really want to make an impact, you got to find these bridges, and different regions bring different strengths in different ways.